Welcome to this video tutorial on the scientific advice process at the European Medicines Agency. This tutorial is designed specifically for academic medicine researchers and developers who are seeking advice on the most appropriate way to generate robust evidence to support their development. In this video, we will explain what scientific advice is and how it can support your medicine development. Walk you through the steps of the process to get scientific advice, from initial registration and accessing the IRIS platform, to preparing your application and submitting it. Guide you on how to write a strong briefing document, including how to formulate your questions and applicant positions. Help you understand the scientific advice process, prepare for an optional discussion meeting, and how to interpret and use the responses you receive. Introduce the various support tools offered by EMA, such as protocol assistance, qualification of novel methodologies, academia briefing meetings, and the Innovation Task Force briefing meetings. And finally, point you to key resources and contacts that can support your medicine development strategy from early planning to regulatory submission. Chapters have been included in this video to make navigation easier and to allow viewers to jump directly to the sections most relevant for their work. These appear as markers on the video's progress bar, and the respective timestamps for each section are shown in the video description below. In this section, we will explain what scientific advice is, who can apply, what the benefits of scientific advice are and when is it most useful. And lastly, we will discuss fee waiver and procedural steps. What is scientific advice and why should you use it? For a medicine to be authorized, medicine developers have to demonstrate that it is effective, safe, and of good quality. In other words, a medicine has to demonstrate a positive benefit-risk balance. During a medicine's development, a developer can request guidance from EMA on quality aspects, such as the manufacturing process of the medicine, on preclinical studies and on clinical trial designs to generate robust evidence on how well a medicine works and how safe it is. This is known as scientific advice. Scientific advice can be requested at any stage of development and for both human and veterinary medicines. It's important to note that scientific advice is not meant to retrospectively validate plans when it's already too late to make meaningful changes, for example, during an ongoing clinical trial. Seeking advice early helps ensure that your development stays on track without compromising its integrity. At the same time, scientific advice does not replace the requirement to seek trial authorization under the Clinical Trials Regulation, ethics review, or other procedures. However, you can share the scientific advice from EMA with your collaborators, with the Ethics Committee and with the National Competent Authority as a part of the clinical trial application prior to initiating a study. Scientific advice provides you with recommendations. These recommendations are non-binding and help researchers to ensure the planned studies' designs, methodologies, and quality measures are more likely to generate robust and complete data that meet regulatory standards, increasing the likelihood of a smooth medicine approval process. EMA gives scientific advice by responding to specific questions posed by developers on the development of a particular medicine. The developers of a medicine present the way they plan to develop the medicine, formulate questions on issues where guidance is needed, and propose their preferred approaches to the issues. EMA then gives advice on the developer's proposals. Who's involved in providing scientific advice? Dozens of experts from a range of disciplines are involved in responding to the questions asked. At EMA, the Committee for Medicinal Products for Human Use, in short the CHMP, is responsible for assessing marketing authorization applications. One of its tasks is also to support research and development by providing scientific advice. This task is assigned to EMA's Scientific Advice Working Party, the SAWP, which is composed of experts nominated by national competent authorities and other delegates. For advanced therapy or pediatric medicinal products, an expert from the Committee for Advanced Therapies, the CAT, or pediatric committee acts as a peer reviewer in the process. The answers to the questions asked by the developer are elaborated by the SAWP, and then the final advice is formally adopted and issued by the CHMP. The EMA also can give scientific advice to developers on the appropriate tests and studies in the development of veterinary medicines. For veterinary medicines, EMA's Committee for Medicinal Products for Veterinary Use, the CVMP, provides scientific advice at the recommendation of the Veterinary Scientific Advice Working Party. Scientific advice for developments of new medicines that could address a public health emergency is channeled through the Emergency Task Force. Who can apply? Any medicine developer can apply for scientific advice. This includes academic institutions, research organizations, and individual scientists. Scientific advice is not just for pharmaceutical companies and small and medium-sized enterprises. In fact, scientific advice and other regulatory procedures are also welcoming researchers and developments from the academic sector, from which many promising medicines originate. However, academic researchers often struggle with the regulatory complexities involved in advancing their solutions and bringing them to patients. By engaging with EMA's experts early, academics can ensure their research is aligned with regulatory requirements, avoiding unnecessary research activities and obstacles later on. What are the benefits of scientific advice? Seeking scientific advice from EMA offers significant advantages, especially for academics who may not have experience navigating regulatory processes. EMA guidance helps medicines developers choose appropriate technical approaches, scientific methods and study designs to generate robust data on a medicine's efficacy and safety and to produce a product of good quality. Increase the likelihood of receiving marketing authorization, but it does not guarantee it. Applications for marketing authorizations following scientific advice had a higher success rate than those that do not. By getting expert feedback early, you can avoid unnecessary studies, reduce costs, and streamline your research strategy. Scientific advice helps academics transition their lab research to first-in-human trials and later clinical trials more efficiently, ensuring they collect the data needed for future approval. If you're working on gene therapy, cell therapy, tissue-engineered product or rare disease treatments, scientific advice provides essential guidance on unique regulatory requirements. For researchers exploring new uses for existing medicines, scientific advice provides input on the additional evidence that needs to be generated. Using regulatory procedures and obtaining scientific advice increase the value of the asset and the confidence of funders, partners, and investors in the project, with positive advice further strengthening this. Start early for the best outcomes. The earlier you seek advice, the better. Addressing quality and non-clinical issues in a scientific advice before moving into clinical research will save time and improve your chances of approval. Scientific advice is particularly useful to medicine developers when you choose or need to deviate in your development plan from scientific guidelines that are available from EMA and other regulators. You are developing an innovative medicine and there appears to be no or insufficient relevant detail in EU guidelines or international guidance documents, or in pharmacopoeia monographs, including draft documents or monographs released for consultation. You are developing new or repurposed medicines targeting re-emerging pathogens for which there is an unmet medical need but insufficient or no guidance is available. Medicine developers can request scientific advice repeatedly and at any stage, during the initial development of a medicine before submission of a marketing authorization application or later on, during the post-authorization phase. Regulators are in a unique position to provide scientific advice. Scientific advice is grounded in the comprehensive experience of regulators, including with more than 700 advices per year. They also review all new medicines for which a marketing authorization has been requested, including those that don't lead to authorization, giving regulators a broad view of what works and what doesn't. Over the decades, regulators have built deep expertise, especially with highly innovative medicines and methods. Their knowledge comes from evaluating a wide range of development strategies and trial designs. At the same time, regulators continue to learn from new scientific and technological developments. Scientific advice is therefore not a one-way process, but a mutual exchange where both developers and regulators gain insights. Importantly, regulators aim to be enablers of progress, supporting innovation that benefits patients and public health. So there are many reasons. That's why academic researchers are strongly encouraged to seek scientific advice, so they can access and benefit from this expertise early in development. Since January 2025, the EMA is offering a fee waiver for scientific advice to certain not-for-profit organizations. This fee waiver supports research with a strong public health impact. An organization must meet the following conditions. It must be non-profit or legally obligated not to share profits with owners, shareholders, or members. It cannot be owned, controlled by, or have certain agreements with any private profit-making organization for sponsoring or participating in the specific research project. It must be located in the European Economic Area. The organization needs to provide proof of these points, such as founding documents and declarations. Additionally, applicants must explain how the advice they seek will positively impact their research and contribute to public health. Depending on their research, they should explain the public health problem being addressed, lack of funding to cover regulatory fees, key aspects of their clinical trials, including multinational efforts, and how their work supports future medicine approvals or develops tools to improve regulatory science and medicine evaluation. For more information, please refer to the fee regulation. We encourage to get in touch with Emma to discuss this fee waiver and other incentives that are available for medicine development. Steps of the process. Understanding the procedural steps for scientific advice can facilitate a smoother interaction and enhance the quality of your medicinal product development. The scientific advice process begins with registration. Developers must newly create or use existing records that identify themselves, their organization, and the medicinal product in EMA's systems. In the system, developers can ask for a preparatory meeting to be arranged, and is highly recommended, particularly for newcomers or complex development cases. The developer then submits a request via the IRIS portal, including a well-structured briefing document outlining scientific questions, development plans, and supporting data. EMA reviews the submission to validate its completeness and the suitability of the questions, and then sets a timetable for the procedure. Once validated, the request moves into the evaluation phase, where two coordinators from the SAWP are appointed to lead the scientific assessment. If needed, a discussion meeting with the developer may be scheduled later in the process to explore key issues further. The procedure concludes with the adoption of a final written report containing the EMA's advice on the submitted questions.
The Regulatory and Scientific Information Management Platform, in short IRIS, is the online secure portal for sponsors to submit scientific applications to the agency and is connected to various databases that are managed by EMA. Before being able to access and use IRIS, the platform needs to know who you are, and your identification is managed through your EMA account. Do you represent an organization, and which is it? Representatives of your organization are managed by your organization in EMA's OMS database. What user access role you need to have. Furthermore, to submit a scientific advice request and other procedures such as orphan designation, you need a valid research product identifier, in short RPI, and this will be explained in more detail later. You need to have an account in the EMA account management system. Using your EMA account, you can submit an application as an individual or as part of an organization. Many organizations, including universities and hospitals, are already registered in the Organization Management System, in short OMS, and you can see these directly in the IRIS portal. EMA Individual Account Management is a user registration system that provides individuals with EMA accounts. Via those accounts, the users access the applications that are managed by the agency, IRIS included. IRIS users will use individual account management to obtain appropriate profiles with roles needed for their work in IRIS. You can affiliate yourself with an organization in OMS. Even if you have been granted a fee reduction, you also need to have a financial account with EMA. And this may exist already with your organization. There is a step-by-step guide and a flow chart in the IRIS Guide to Registration and RPIs with which you can find out how to proceed in your particular situation. Applying as an individual or organization, you will need to consider whether you want to apply for scientific advice as an individual or as part of an organization. In case of the latter, your organization must be registered through the Organizations Management System (OMS), otherwise you will not be able to affiliate yourself to an organization and request the appropriate IRIS user role. Registration of a new organization takes from 5 to 10 working days. Once you have registered your organization, the next step is to request access to IRIS, which is done via the EMA Account Management Portal. In order to create an application for scientific advice in the IRIS portal on behalf of an organization, you must have already registered and been granted a manager role through the EMA Account Management Portal. For this, create a service desk request and attach the required documentation. Approval can take up to 2 working days. Applying as an individual is simpler as you will automatically have the right IRIS role assigned, the IRIS Individual User, which allows to create and submit applications as an individual. Once your EMA account has been generated, you can log in IRIS using your EMA username followed by id.ema.europa.eu and your EMA account password. You are now ready to use the platform. EMA uses research product identifiers, RPIs, to track medicines through and across interactions and procedures, to connect submissions and entitlements for the same development entity. Companies and individuals that approach EMA for the first time with a new medicinal product and do not have a previously assigned RPI will need to request a new RPI via the IRIS platform. To do so, you need the active substance in the product to be already present in the EMA public list of all substances. You can check if your substance is already registered by opening the substance list available on IRIS. In case your active substance is not registered, you will need to raise an EMA service desk request to register a new substance in the public list, which may take up to 5 working days. The request for a new RPI for an active substance from the list will be validated by EMA staff, and it may take a day or 2 for the validated RPI to appear in the portal for you to use when creating the draft of your scientific advice submission. So it is a good idea to prepare the RPI well in advance of the advice. The EMA has helpful guidance and training videos to show applicants how to use the IRIS platform and how to submit scientific application, including one on orphan designation. Now that you have gone through those preparatory steps, you should be ready to proceed with your submission of a scientific advice request. The agency offers assistance applicants for drafting the briefing documents through preparatory meetings. These meetings are free of charge and held via teleconference. Preparatory meetings are an opportunity for applicants to introduce the proposed development program and receive feedback from agency scientific staff on the scope of advice that would be important at the stage, such as on the domains of quality, non-clinical or clinical research. Receive feedback on the type and wording of the questions to be included in the briefing document, as well as feedback on how to include the applicant's position and explain it in the document for obtaining satisfactory answers. Identify additional issues to be included in the request for scientific advice. Obtain more detailed information concerning the procedure for obtaining scientific advice or protocol assistance. Ask regulatory questions that are outside the scope of scientific advice, such as which legal basis for authorization may be chosen. The meetings also allow EMA to determine if there is a need for additional expertise at an earlier stage in the procedure. Preparatory meetings are particularly important for first-time users of these procedures, for SMEs, and for applicants seeking general advice on specific types of medicinal products or therapies. The information provided by the applicant forms the basis for the preparatory meeting. The opinions expressed by EMA participants represent their individual views and do not represent the final opinion of the Scientific Advice Working Party or Committee for Medicinal Products for Human Use. After the preparatory meeting, the agency officers will provide applicants with a bullet point list of recommendations for the briefing document and advice procedure.
Applicants must upload a draft briefing document introducing the medicine under development and outlining their questions and positions in IRIS at the time of application, using the CHMP Scientific Advice Briefing Document template. The first part of the briefing document template is designated exclusively for regulators' internal use and should not be completed, modified, or deleted by applicants. It provides a space for EMA coordinators and experts to summarize the request, prepare for plenary discussion, and draft preliminary positions. The remainder of the template is to be completed by the applicant and forms the core of the scientific advice request. It is structured into 4 main sections: the introduction, the overview of product development, questions and applicants' positions, and references and annexes. The introduction provides background on the disease, the product, and its regulatory status. The overview of product development covers key information on quality, non-clinical, and clinical studies. Questions and applicants' positions, the central part of the request, where specific scientific questions are presented to the CHMP. And finally, the references and annexes section, where supporting materials and literature are provided. Each section of the template features green text that gives applicants specific guidance on how to describe the details expected in that part. This section provides background on the disease, the product, its regulatory status, and the reasons for seeking advice. In the background on the disease, you need to provide a concise summary of the disease the product is intended to treat. Describe prevalence, burden, and current treatment options. And reference treatment guidelines and relevant publications where applicable. For the background on the product, explain the mechanism of action, formulation, and pharmacological classification. This can be based on widely used systems such as the WHO Anatomical Therapeutic Chemical, in short ATC classification. The aim is to explain the product within its pharmacological context, making clear how it compares to existing medicines in terms of mechanism of action and therapeutic use. Clearly state the proposed indication and dosage regimen. And mention any special precautions or recommendations for use of the product, including a possible risk management strategy. In the regulatory status section, applicants should outline the product's current regulatory status, including approvals, special designations, and prior regulatory interactions, in the EU or beyond. If the product is already authorized in the EU or other regions, the type of approval, for example full, conditional or hybrid, and any post-approval commitments should be specified. If not yet authorized, the planned submission strategy and timelines should be stated. Key regulatory designations, such as orphan medicine designation, pediatric investigation plan agreements, or prime inclusion, should be highlighted, along with their impact on development. Any prior scientific advice from CHMP, national competent authorities for medicines or health technology agencies in EU member states or international regulators such as the FDA, MHRA, PMDA or Swissmedic should be summarized, especially how it has influenced the current approach. If there are parallel advice procedures ongoing or planned with such other organizations, these should also be mentioned. If the development deviates from EMA or ICH scientific guidelines, a clear rationale should be provided in this section and the concerned question. For follow-up advice requests, previous CHMP recommendations and any resulting modifications to the development plan should be briefly summarized. Providing a clear regulatory history ensures that scientific advice is well informed and aligned with the product's approval strategy. In the rationale section, clearly state the specific reasons for requesting scientific advice. Specify whether the advice is related to quality, non-clinical or clinical aspects. Scientific advice may also cover questions related to regulatory pathways, provided they relate to scientific considerations. For example, applicants can ask whether the planned studies and anticipated efficacy or safety evidence are adequate to support a conditional marketing authorization or an authorization under exceptional circumstances. However, once development has been completed, it is not possible to use scientific advice for a data pre-assessment in view of such types of marketing authorizations. Questions of a purely regulatory nature are outside the scope of scientific advice and can instead be raised during the preparatory meeting or via the academia office. Another way is to raise your question via Ask EMA, which we will explain in more detail later. In the overview of product development section, applicants should provide a clear scientific overview of the medicinal product in their development. When preparing the overview, applicants should think about how each area, quality, non-clinical, and clinical, may be directly or indirectly relevant to the questions they are asking. It is best practice to provide full summaries for the area that is the focus of the scientific advice request. For areas that are outside this focus, it is acceptable to include only high-level information, giving enough context without going into unnecessary detail. For the quality background information, begin by describing the active substance. Include details on its molecular structure, how it is manufactured, and the methods used for quality control. For the finished product section, outline the product's full composition, key specifications, stability data, and proposed packaging format. This is also the place to highlight any major changes or plans concerning the pharmaceutical quality of the medicinal product, such as modifications to the manufacturing process, formulation or control strategy. If your product includes a medical device component, be sure to indicate this and explain how it complies with the Medical Devices Regulation EU 2017/745. The same applies for in vitro diagnostics such as certain biomarkers and companion diagnostics, and how they are developed under Regulation 2017/746. Guidance on both is available from the EMA website as well as the European Commission. The goal is to present in this section a coherent, scientifically grounded overview of your product's development status. In the non-clinical section, applicants should provide a structured summary of all non-clinical studies in a tabulated format and mention whether the studies are completed, ongoing, or planned. The table should include for each study, the study number, the good laboratory practice adherence status, whether it is GLP, non-GLP, or GLP-like, and key design features. These features include number and sex of animals, study groups and dosing regimens, endpoints measured, and key outcomes. If GLP-like, describe the measures taken to ensure quality. Literature-based data may be used, particularly in repurposing cases, if adequately supported by scientific references. Each study should be categorized under one of the following domains. Pharmacology, covering the mechanism of action and key pharmacodynamic effects. Pharmacokinetics, including absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion data. Pharmacodynamics, focusing on the relationship between drug concentration and effect, including biomarker response where applicable. Toxicology, summarizing toxicology findings, major safety signals and tolerability profile. Applicants should provide detailed summaries for the domains relevant to the advice being sought, while for domains not in scope, a high-level overview is sufficient to provide context. Where available, include the full study protocol as an annex. If the protocol is not available, ensure a detailed narrative description is included in the main text to enable clear understanding of the study design, rationale, and findings. The clinical section should provide a comprehensive overview of all clinical trials and other clinical research as relevant to the development of the product. Begin with a diagram or table that visually outlines the key elements of the study design for all trials that are ongoing or planned and are the subject of one or more scientific advice questions. The diagram should show whether the trial is randomized or single-arm, the number of patients per group, the primary and secondary endpoints, and the time points for assessments. Include a table summarizing each study. This should feature the study number or identifier, the trial phase, the study design, such as adaptive or open label, the target population, the status, that is planned, ongoing, or completed including approximate dates, and the number of enrolled patients, the geographic location if relevant, and any unique methodological aspects. Following the table, provide a narrative for each study, especially those for which you are seeking scientific advice. A high-level summary is sufficient here. Detailed rationale and justification for design choices should instead be presented in the applicant's position section where relevant questions are asked. Clarify if the study is already recruiting or if there is flexibility for modifications. For studies relevant to the questions in the advice, include the main rationale behind design decisions as well as key justifications for inclusion and exclusion criteria, proposed endpoints, statistical hierarchy, and study duration. This allows assessors to understand your reasoning, consider possible alternatives, and provide targeted feedback. For studies not directly linked to your questions, a shorter description may be sufficient. Subsections should include as relevant based on the advice sought. Clinical pharmacology, where applicants should describe the studies supporting dose finding, exposure-response relationships, and PK/PD bridging. For the efficacy, summarize pivotal and supportive efficacy trials, highlighting outcomes, statistical considerations, and protocol amendments. For safety, discuss the safety dataset, including total patient exposure, nature and frequency of adverse events, serious adverse events of special interest, and any dose-limiting toxicities. Describe safety monitoring protocols and any risk mitigation measures. Proactively addressing these points will support a more informed and valuable scientific advice discussion. The section with the questions and the applicant's position forms the core of the scientific advice briefing document, and it is in this section where the applicant presents their specific questions and concerns to the CHMP. Questions during scientific advice can either relate to quality aspects such as manufacturing, chemical, pharmaceutical and biological testing of the medicine, non-clinical aspects such as toxicological and pharmacological tests designed to show the activity of the medicine in vitro or in vivo, clinical and methodological aspects and include appropriateness of study design elements such as randomized or controlled versus single-arm design, choice of comparator, in- and exclusion criteria and selection of primary and secondary endpoints and described using the estimate framework. But they can also relate to statistical tests to use, statistical analysis plan, use of modeling and simulation, or post-authorization activities including risk management plans. There is also the possibility to ask multidisciplinary questions, questions that relate to more than one area of advice. For example, a multidisciplinary question on non-clinical and clinical development could be: does the CHMP agree with the proposed dose for the first-in-human trial based on the available non-clinical data? Applicants may also raise questions about the overall development and registration strategy for their product, for example, how their proposed studies could support conditional marketing authorization, demonstrate significant benefit for maintaining orphan designation, or address pediatric development requirements. It is important to note that purely regulatory questions, such as formal eligibility for conditional marketing authorization, are outside the scope of scientific advice. When including such a question, applicants are advised to explain how their product meets the criteria for the proposed pathway, and to provide a sound scientific justification to support their request for advice. In a single submission for scientific advice, you can ask questions in any single area: quality, non-clinical, clinical and multidisciplinary altogether, because the area of questions should depend on the current stage and needs of your development. In other words, you are not required to submit questions on all areas in one advice submission. For example, one can submit non-clinical questions in a first scientific advice and in a separate, subsequent scientific advice address quality or clinical topics. Each question should be clearly formulated as: does the CHMP agree with? And followed by a standalone applicant's position that provides a comprehensive, evidence-based justification and supported by relevant scientific and regulatory rationale. Ensuring each applicant's position is well-structured and self-explanatory will facilitate a clearer, more effective regulatory discussion. The applicant's positions should include enough data and information to be assessed without having to refer to other sections of the briefing document, though cross-references to annexes may be included for additional data. Each position should cover context and proposal, a clear statement of the issue and proposed approach. Scientific and regulatory justification, supporting data, relevant guidelines, literature, or prior regulatory advice. Alternative approaches, if applicable, a rationale for rejecting other approaches. Implications, the potential impact on development and approval. Common issues observed in applicants' positions, especially in clinical questions, include unclear study timelines and missing justifications for key study design elements, such as primary endpoints or estimates, choice of comparator, inclusion or exclusion criteria, sample size, multiplicity control, and safety monitoring strategies. These problems often occur when scientific advice is requested too early, before enough data are available to well inform the next step, or when applicants do not explain the reasoning behind their design choices or do not discuss possible alternatives. To avoid this, make sure your questions are supported by sufficient data, and always provide a clear rationale for your decisions. Also, be explicit about the status of each study, that is planned, ongoing, completed, and whether modifications are still feasible in case of ongoing studies. A visual diagram summarizing the trial design together with a clear narrative of the overall program will help assessors quickly understand your plan and provide more valuable feedback. After each question and applicant's position, there is a section called Draft CHMP Answer to Questions. This section will be filled by regulators. The coordinator's draft answer will include a discussion of the applicant's proposal and a conclusion indicating whether the proposal is supported, partially supported with caveats, or not supported, with alternatives if relevant. To make your scientific advice request as effective as possible, it's essential to formulate your questions clearly, precisely, and in line with regulatory expectations. Questions that are too broad, ambiguous, or lacking scientific context often result in unhelpful, incomplete, or even no response at all. Scientific advice is not a review of a study protocol, it's a targeted response to specific, well-framed issues that need regulatory input. Here are some examples of commonly encountered poorly formulated questions, along with explanations of why they miss the mark and how they can be improved. For example, are the patients selected representative? This question is too unclear, it lacks context and does not specify which criteria or population. Better is to formulate it as, does the CHMP agree that the inclusion and exclusion criteria are appropriate and consistent with the intended treatment population? The question, are the planned measures to assess the benefits of a medicine valid and relevant? Uses ambiguous terms like valid and benefits, which are hard to assess without specifics. It is better to formulate as, does the CHMP agree that the proposed primary and secondary efficacy endpoints are adequate to demonstrate clinical benefit in an intended patient population? The question, is the proposed plan to analyze results appropriate? Is overly general. Regulators cannot respond meaningfully without knowing what aspect of the design and analysis plan is being referred to. It is better to formulate as, does the CHMP agree with the proposed statistical analysis plan and methodology, including an interim analysis to stop the study early in case of positive results? Here is another example. Does the study last long enough and include enough patients to provide the necessary data for the benefit-risk assessment? This question combines multiple variables such as duration, size, outcomes and uses a general term, benefit-risk assessment, that lacks precision at the planning stage. It is better to rephrase this into the following distinct questions. Does the CHMP agree that the proposed study duration is adequate to assess the efficacy and safety endpoints? Complemented by, does the CHMP agree that the planned sample size is sufficient to demonstrate the efficacy of the product? Other examples include, does the CHMP agree with the proposed control group of the trial? This question is acceptable when supported by the study context and rationale. Are the plans to follow the long-term safety of the product appropriately designed? This question is generally acceptable when justified by the indication and expected risk profile. In addition to avoiding poorly formulated questions, it's important to understand which topics area outside the scope of EMA's scientific advice. For example, questions that would require results assessment or that fall under the responsibility of other regulatory pathways or bodies. For example, proposal to change an agreed pediatric investigation plan, a PIP study. Questions such as, could the proposed modeling study replace Study X in the agreed pediatric investigation plan? Are outside the scope of scientific advice and must be addressed to the Pediatric Committee, the PDCO. Acceptability of final specifications. Asking whether the proposed active substance or finished product specifications are acceptable implies a conclusive review. Instead, scientific advice can only address whether the plan is appropriate to derive those specifications is appropriate. Adequacy of non-clinical data for first-in-human trials. Scientific advice is not the right forum to determine this, as it requires a full review of the non-clinical package. This question may be addressed to national competent authorities in EU member states who review the non-clinical data in the context of an application for clinical trial authorization. Phase 3 results and marketing authorization. Questions in how far existing results of a Phase 3 trial are sufficient to support a marketing authorization are outside the scope of scientific advice and belong to the marketing authorization application process. Understanding these limitations ensures that your questions are well targeted and appropriately framed for regulatory consideration in the scientific advice procedure. As mentioned earlier, a preparatory meeting with EMA scientific staff can be requested to receive input and guidance on scope and phrasing of questions and positions for further refinement. In this final section of your briefing document, ensure that all cited references are clearly listed, either as footnotes throughout the document or compiled in a dedicated bibliography. You should also include annexes with key supporting materials that complement and substantiate the scientific and regulatory positions presented. These may include the investigator's brochure, relevant study protocols and reports, statistical analysis plans, and any previous regulatory correspondence that provides important context. Providing complete, well-organized annexes enhances the clarity and credibility of your submission and allows assessors to fully understand your development strategy and supporting evidence. When developing medicines, it is essential to consult and use EMA scientific guidelines to ensure your approach aligns with the current regulatory and scientific expectations in the EU. These guidelines provide harmonized advice on how best to meet legal requirements for quality, safety, and efficacy. In parallel, the European Pharmacopoeia sets binding standards for pharmaceutical quality, especially for the dossier's quality part, while scientific guidelines help applicants navigate evolving topics like clinical trial design or advanced manufacturing. Together, these tools ensure consistency, scientific rigor, and regulatory readiness throughout the development process. EMA's Medicine Finder helps you locate information on authorized medicines by searching for the product name or active substance. However, it only includes centrally authorized medicines, that is, those evaluated by EMA. To refine your search further, the Advanced Search tool allows you to filter by procedure type, status, such as refused or withdrawn, and other criteria. A key output of these searches are the European Public Assessment Reports, in short EPARs, one web page for each medicine, with each page providing detailed regulatory evaluations of medicines. EPARs cover the full development spectrum, including quality, non-clinical and clinical data, and offer insights into how similar products were assessed, helping you align your development strategy with regulatory expectations.
Once you've completed your briefing document and you're ready to submit your application to the EMA, the next step is to use the IRIS platform. To support applicants, EMA has created a detailed step-by-step tutorial. This guide walks you through the entire scientific advice submission process, from registering for access to IRIS, to navigating the platform, creating your application, and finally, submitting it. You also find guidance on where to access user support and helpful documentation, ensuring you have everything you need to complete your submission smoothly.
What happens after submitting your scientific advice request?
During the validation phase of the submission, the EMA scientific officer will review the briefing documentation and may identify the need for submission of additional documents and/or provide comments for improving the structure, questions, or applicant's positions in the briefing document. After the scientific advice request is validated, 2 expert members of the SAWP are appointed as coordinators. The 2 coordinators have expertise relevant to the advice request and are supported by experts from the national agencies or from other EU agencies. Each coordinator prepares a draft report, and in particular areas of disagreement are discussed during the SAWP meeting. In most cases, the draft reports are combined into a single report, which then forms the basis of the advice letter adopted by the CHMP after the SAWP meeting. Sometimes, however, the SAWP may need additional clarification or justifications. In that case, SAWP sends the developer a list of issues around day 40 of the procedure. Receiving a list of issues means the developer will also be invited to a discussion meeting at the next SAWP meeting, and they may need to provide written responses to some of the issues beforehand. A discussion meeting is not an indication of the likely outcome, but simply reflects the need to discuss specific points in more detail. During the discussion meeting, SAWP seeks to clarify potential disagreements with the developer and alternative development strategies. Throughout the scientific advice process, input is gathered from other EMA committees such as the CAT, PDCO or COMP, external experts, who can include patients, either through written comments or by attending meetings. The advice process concludes with the adoption of the final advice letter by the CHMP, which is then shared with the developer. Scientific advice is not a verdict or peer review, but a regulatory dialogue offering expert guidance based on the data provided. It's meant to inform and support your development, not to judge or limit it, so you can use it to refine, adapt, or reshape your research strategy. Depending on how your development progresses, there are several ways to continue the dialogue with EMA after receiving scientific advice. Receive a written clarification. If parts of the advice seem unclear or if you need help interpreting a recommendation, you may request a written clarification. This is especially useful when trying to implement the advice into ongoing development plans. A follow-up scientific advice. If new data become available or your approach has evolved since the original advice, it may be appropriate to request a formal follow-up scientific advice. This allows EMA to reassess your development strategy in light of new evidence and offer updated guidance. Veterinary scientific advice follows the same overall purpose as human scientific advice, to guide developers in generating robust, regulatory relevant evidence for their product. It is handled through the same IRIS platform, follows similar procedural steps, and benefits from the same fee waiver provisions. However, there are important differences. Advice for veterinary medicines is provided by the Committee for Medicinal Products for Veterinary Use, the CVMP, and the scope reflects the unique considerations of veterinary product development. In addition to quality, safety, and clinical development questions, such as study design, endpoints, duration, comparators, and target animal safety, veterinary advice also covers species-specific aspects, including how a product behaves in different target animal populations. A key area unique to veterinary medicines is guidance on maximum residue levels, MRLs, for food-producing animals, ensuring consumer protection. For generic products, developers may also request advice on bioequivalence studies, while developers of new antimicrobial or antiparasitic medicines can obtain preliminary risk profiling, which assesses antimicrobial resistance hazards, environmental release, human exposure, and potential public health consequences. As with human scientific advice, applicants submit focused scientific questions, provide their proposed approach and justification, and include relevant supporting documents in annexes. Across both systems, the principles are the same. Ask prospective, well-defined questions that show how you intend to design your studies, rather than requesting general instruction on study design, and provide enough context for assessors to offer meaningful guidance.
Academic developers and SMEs who develop therapies may have limited regulatory expertise to navigate through the various complementary procedures in place at EMA that would support them during the development of the product. Several of these tools are especially relevant for academic developers and will be described in more detail shortly, but here we first provide an overview of the main options available. For instance, the Innovation Task Force offers a platform for early dialogue on innovative products and methodologies, while the SME and Academia Office provide targeted support for small enterprises and academic research groups and organizations for all products and developments. If you're developing a treatment for a rare disease, applying for orphan drug designation can ensure access to important incentives, such as market exclusivity against similar products and reduced fees for scientific advice, also known as protocol assistance. The inclusion in the PRIME scheme provides further valuable support for promising treatments that address unmet medical needs. Developers granted PRIME status benefit from early and enhanced interaction with EMA, along with potential fee reductions or waivers for scientific advice, depending on their profile. For specific aspects of advanced therapy medicinal products, in short ATMPs, EMA offers two specific tools, ATMP classification and ATMP certification. The classification procedure confirms whether a product qualifies as an ATMP, especially useful for medicinal products in borderline areas. The certification procedure allows SMEs to submit quality and non-clinical data for scientific evaluation. This helps identify issues early in development and provides reassurance that the development is on the right track. You can also contact EMA anytime via Ask EMA by submitting a question through the online form on the corporate website. It's a flexible way to request information or guidance, complementing other support tools like the scientific advice, an ITF briefing meeting, and the academia office support. We will now highlight a few of these in more details. Protocol assistance is a special form of scientific advice available for developers of designated orphan medicines for rare diseases. It is only available for human medicinal products. For veterinary products, the counterpart is known as limited markets. Sponsors can request protocol assistance from EMA at any stage of development, after receiving the designation. The process is essentially the same. During protocol assistance, sponsors can raise the same type of questions regarding the quality, non-clinical and clinical development of orphan medicines, as for non-orphan medicines. Protocol assistance can include questions on the demonstration of significant benefit if other authorized products exist. There is no restriction on the number of times a sponsor can request protocol assistance. For any questions, you can contact scientific advice at ema.europa.eu. As part of EMA's support tools for academic medicines developers, the qualification procedure offers a formal pathway to seek scientific advice on the acceptability of novel methodologies, such as new clinical endpoints or disease registries, that can support evidence generation. Qualification procedures are quite broad, and do not refer to a medicinal product. The qualification concerns methods and tools that can speed up or otherwise improve medicine development. Some examples of what could be appropriate for qualification include novel methods to predict toxicity, methods to enrich a patient population for a clinical trial, surrogate clinical endpoints, meaning new sensitive scales to measure efficacy of a new medicine instead of currently used clinical endpoints, patient-reported outcomes which need to be validated, or disease registries to support assessing the safety and efficacy of medicines. A dedicated video on how to apply and benefit from the qualification procedure can be viewed through the link provided in the description. Those academic developers who are working on innovative approaches in the area of pharmaceutical quality are encouraged to also engage with EMA's Quality Innovation Group. This group provides a platform to explore novel manufacturing, control, and quality assessment technologies. One key initiative is the Listen and Learn focus group meetings, which offer an informal setting for researchers to present ideas and challenges and receive non-binding regulatory feedback. These sessions are particularly valuable in early development stages. Interested academics can find more information and contact details to express their interest in participating on the Quality Innovation Group webpage. The Emergency Task Force, the ETF, is an advisory and support body that handles regulatory activities in preparation for and during a public health emergency, such as a pandemic. EMA established the ETF in accordance with the Regulation on EMA's Reinforced Role, Regulation EU 2022-123. The ETF was already working during pandemics and major outbreaks since 2009, but the new regulation made the group permanent and entrusted it with an important role in crisis preparedness. The key activities of the ETF include providing scientific advice to developers for medicines that target a declared or a future potential pandemic. It includes advice on clinical trials and related ethical aspects. The ETF also performs reviews of evidence on medicines under investigation or authorized to prospectively facilitate authorization during crises or provide recommendations to EMA committees, member states, or the European Commission. In preparedness, the ETF works on specific viral pathogens in line with the WHO Research and Development Blueprint for viral families with pandemic or epidemic potential. It also works on all bacterial vaccines and treatments against antimicrobial resistant. Finally, it is responsible for preparedness against chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. The remit is defined in Annex 1 of the ETF work plan. The ETF is composed of experts on infectious diseases who are part of other committees and groups within EMA, as depicted in the right-hand part of the slide. The ETF performs scientific advice assessments for developers of medicines under its remit. ETF scientific advice follows the standard 40 to 70-day timetable in interpandemic periods, in line with the regular scientific advice procedure. During declared emergencies, ETF scientific advice is accelerated to 20 days and provided free of charge. Recently, the ETF updated its scientific advice process to allow for questions related to clinical trial applications. For this purpose, the ETF will involve clinical trial and ethics experts from national authorities at no additional cost. The aim is to facilitate clinical trial authorization and harmonization of requirements across EU authorities, both for product authorization and the authorization of clinical trials during development. This initiative is similar to the SORP CTCG pilot and is supported by broader activities under ACT EU, which aim to speed up clinical trials in the EU, particularly in emergency contexts. These initiatives will be discussed in more detail in the next section. ETF plays an important role in maintaining continuous, iterative dialogue with vaccine developers. This includes informal teleconferences and dedicated workshops with industry, academia, and learned societies, for example on myocarditis following vaccination, long COVID, or vaccine effectiveness. ETF also supports early interactions on infectious pathogens, chemical, biological, and radionuclear threats, and antimicrobial resistance. EMA is committed to maintaining close contact with developers working on treatments or vaccines for emerging health threats, and encourages them to reach out early. Developers targeting infectious diseases or other potential public health emergencies can contact EMA directly via the dedicated mailbox. These ongoing exchanges, together with formal scientific advice procedures, help build the evidence base needed to draft high-quality guidance for developers. Over time, ETF is set to become a key reference point supporting product development across the entire life cycle. Its membership includes specialist experts in infectious diseases and chemical, biological, and radionuclear agents from both the regulatory network and the wider scientific community, ensuring robust and multidisciplinary input. The Accelerating Clinical Trials in the EU initiative, in short ACT EU, was launched to modernize and streamline clinical trial processes across Europe. A key priority under this initiative is the implementation of 2 pilots on consolidated advice in clinical trials, the Pre-CTA and SORP CTCG, launched in June 2024. These pilots aim to foster early dialogue between sponsors or applicants and regulators, particularly clinical trial assessors. This collaborative approach promotes harmonization, minimizes duplication, and ultimately accelerates the development of innovative medicines. The Pre-CTA pilot offers technical and regulatory guidance prior to the submission of a clinical trial application, provided by the clinical trial units of national competent authorities. The SORP/CTCG pilot delivers integrated scientific advice on clinical trial design, helping sponsors align development plans with both marketing authorization and clinical trial requirements. This advice is jointly provided by the Scientific Advice Working Party and the Clinical Trials Coordination Group. Importantly, clinical trial assessors from national competent authorities actively participate in both pilots, ensuring that trial design considerations are fully addressed. All guidance documents, recorded webinars, and the list of participating member states are available on the ACT EU website. One of the defining features of these pilots is their simplicity. Pre-CTA follows a quick and straightforward process, with advice provided within 30 days. SORP CTCG involves no additional administrative burden compared to standard SORP advice, maintaining usual timelines and fees. Moreover, the pilots offer significant financial incentives for academic sponsors and SME, in terms of reduction of fees. These measures make the pilots particularly accessible to academic and non-commercial organizations, enabling them to benefit from high-quality regulatory input without prohibitive costs. Since January 2025, applicants can request two types of joint scientific consultations, JSCs, either a simple JSC, involving only HTA bodies, or a parallel JSC, which brings together the EMA and the participating HTAs. At completion of a parallel JSC, applicants receive outcome documents from both sides, a consolidated JSC outcome document reflecting the HTA's position, and a final advice letter from the SORP adopted by the CHMP from EMA. Applications are selected during fixed request periods by the coordination group on HTA. HTAs from across Europe are participating. Compared with the earlier Unit to 24 format, several elements have changed. Previously, consultations were run through a hands-on group composed of active HTAs and observers, with a single annual call for interest, and the German HTA body acting as the coordination contact. Under the HTA regulation, assessors and co-assessors are now selected from the JSC subgroup. Applications take place during request periods, and the European Commission leads the HTA Secretariat function. The key features remain consistent, the selection criteria are identical, the selection itself is made by the HTA coordination group, while EMA is not involved in the selection. For parallel JSCs, the time slot for assessment is allocated only after the selection decision. The submission time slots shown here illustrate the regular and predictable structure of the process. This slide outlines the key steps in the parallel EMA-HTA joint scientific consultation procedure. The process begins with the submission of the briefing package, which is sent simultaneously to EMA and the JSC Secretariat. After a validation check, the package is confirmed as complete, and this marks the official start of the 70-day procedure. The primary assessment is then carried out by the HTA assessor and co-assessor on HTA's side and two scientific advice working party coordinators on EMA's side. Ahead of the discussion meeting, there is structured liaison between EMA and HTA, including a teleconference to exchange preliminary views. The discussion meeting is a central element of the parallel JSC. It always takes place under the 70-day timeline, and lasts around 3.5 hours. It is co-chaired by EMA and HTA representatives. Following the meeting, the applicant receives separate outputs, the JSC outcome document, adopted by the HTA coordination group, and the EMA final advice letter. Together, this process ensures coordinated, timely, and transparent scientific advice addressing regulatory as well as HTA perspectives. In addition to seeking scientific advice at the European level through EMA, academic researchers are also encouraged to explore national scientific advice offered by their respective national competent authorities. This form of advice can be particularly valuable for early-stage development questions, smaller-scale studies, or when navigating specific national requirements. Each country may have slightly different procedures, but national advice often complements EMA advice, helping you prepare better for centralized interactions or clarify context-specific regulatory expectations. If you're unsure whether to approach your national agency or EMA, consider the type of feedback you need and the scope of your development. In many cases, starting at national level can be a strategic first step. In addition to single-agency national advice, researchers can also benefit from the simultaneous national scientific advice, in short SNSA, procedure. This pathway enables applicants to obtain coordinated feedback from more than one national competent authority at the same time. By engaging several agencies in parallel, SNSA helps to highlight potential differences in national expectations early on, supports greater alignment across authorities, and reduces the need for multiple sequential procedures. This makes SNSA particularly valuable for projects with cross-border relevance, complex development questions, or multinational clinical trials, where early clarity on regulatory expectations is essential. Applicants can submit new SNSA requests via snsa at fag-afmps.be. To better support academic researchers, not-for-profit developers, and scientific societies and provide orientation in the regulatory landscape, EMA offers academia briefing meetings, dedicated sessions designed to foster open dialogue and early guidance, where academic developers can openly share the hurdles they face during the development of innovative products, from regulatory uncertainties to scientific bottlenecks. These meetings are not just about offering advice, they're also about dialogue. EMA actively engages with scientists to understand how academic research can contribute to solving current regulatory challenges. Developers can raise questions on a wide range of regulatory topics, from product classification and trial design to pathways for rare disease treatments, getting early insights to shape their strategy. The meetings offer guidance on how to structure research in a way that aligns with future regulatory requirements, helping academic teams move their projects forward with clarity. Academia briefing meetings are free of charge and do not require any formal package, making them accessible and low burden for academic teams. Developers are encouraged to reconnect with EMA as their projects evolve, fostering a continuous and supportive engagement throughout the R&D lifecycle. These meetings not only offer early support to academic developers but also enable meaningful exchange with regulators, allowing academic insights to inform regulatory science, bridge knowledge gaps, and shape guidance in emerging areas of innovation. For an overview of the support available for academia, please visit the newly updated EMA Academia webpage. It offers a clear overview of tailored support opportunities for academic and not-for-profit researchers and illustrates how EMA collaborates with academia to advance medicine development, regulatory assessment, and deliver regulatory science solutions. For small and medium-sized enterprises, the EMA SME Office provides tailored assistance. It acts as a dedicated communication channel, helping SMEs navigate regulatory requirements and product development, with targeted guidance on incentives, orphan designation, pediatric obligations, data protection, and clinical trial requirements. Support through the SME Office applies to both human and veterinary medicinal products. For SMEs, a key tool is the SME Briefing Meeting, a structured 90-minute session, free of charge, with an interdisciplinary EMA team. These meetings focus on shaping regulatory strategy and result in written minutes that capture advice and outcomes. SMEs are encouraged to raise strategic questions such as: when should I apply for scientific advice? Which guidelines are most relevant for my development? Is my product eligible for the centralized procedure? What legal basis should I choose for my application? Training and educational materials are available to SMEs, like the SME User Guide, which provides a comprehensive overview of the centralized procedure and helps SMEs navigate the EU regulatory framework for medicines. To ensure receiving the latest scientific and regulatory news, developers can subscribe to the EMA SME newsletter. SMEs with a valid EMA SME status have access to financial incentives, including a 90% fee reduction for scientific advice, and 100% fee reduction for SMEs with a product holding an orphan drug designation. The EMA offers a conditional fee exemption for SMEs, allowing them to avoid paying marketing authorization application fees if the application fails despite having followed EMA scientific advice. To qualify, the SME must demonstrate that the recommendations from the scientific advice were properly considered and implemented in the application. To access this support and further resources, SMEs can visit the EMA SME Office webpage. The Innovation Task Force briefing meetings focus on support to highly innovative developments by offering early and informal engagement between developers and various European regulatory experts. These meetings serve as a first opportunity for dialogue with regulators, often long before formal scientific advice is requested. ITF support explicitly covers both human and veterinary innovation, ensuring early regulatory dialogue for novel technologies and products across both sectors. The service is not limited to innovative medicines such as cell and gene therapies but also includes innovative methodologies and technologies such as artificial intelligence, in manufacturing, in medicine delivery, such as nanoformulations, and novel approaches to replace, reduce, and refine animal use in medicine development as well as biomarkers. Each 90-minute meeting is free of charge and conducted in a brainstorming format, where developers can present their ideas, technologies, or methodologies, particularly those in areas with little or no existing regulatory guidance. The emphasis is on open, exploratory orientation or discussion rather than formal positions, making it ideal for early-stage innovation. To apply for a meeting, developers must submit a concise 3-page ITF meeting request form, available on the EMA website. Once accepted, they meet with a multidisciplinary panel of EU experts who provide insight into scientific, technical, and regulatory aspects. Topics discussed vary widely, from cutting-edge manufacturing methods and 3D bioprinting to AI-enabled trial endpoints, and new approach methodologies, NAMs, supporting the 3 Ps, refine, reduce, replace animal use, including in vitro assays, organoids, and organ-on-chip technologies. Importantly, an analysis of recent ITF interactions revealed that 85% of meetings result in actionable guidance, helping applicants navigate the regulatory landscape. These early interactions support a smoother transition from early-stage medicine development to marketing authorization by preparing applicants for subsequent regulatory procedures, such as scientific advice, qualification of novel methodologies, and formal submissions. At the same time, while also helping the EU regulatory system anticipate and adapt to emerging innovations. To further support academic and not-for-profit developers, EMA has established the ACT EU Helpdesk, part of the Accelerating Clinical Trials in the EU initiative. The Helpdesk provides tailored, early-stage regulatory guidance to non-commercial sponsors involved in clinical trials. It offers technical assistance on CTIS functionalities and addresses questions related to regulatory requirements across the clinical trial lifecycle. Where appropriate, the Helpdesk may also liaise with national competent authorities to provide case-specific support. You can submit your question by raising a ticket about CTIS in the EMA service desk and indicating your status as a non-commercial sponsor in the user affiliation field. To wrap up this tutorial, here are the key messages to keep in mind. Scientific advice helps align your development with regulatory expectations, reducing uncertainty and strengthening your research, valorizing your asset and clearing a way towards approval. IRIS is the central portal for submissions. Ensure your account, documentation, and briefing book are complete and compliant. Early engagement and clear questions with well-justified applicant positions lead to more effective feedback and can prevent costly delays. Academic developers are strongly encouraged to apply, with dedicated support tools like fee waivers, preparatory meetings, and protocol assistance. This concludes our tutorial on the EMA scientific advice process. We hope it has equipped you with the insights and practical steps needed to plan, prepare, and submit a successful request. By engaging proactively and using the tools and resources available, you can help accelerate your medicine's development and improve its chances of regulatory success. For an overview of the support available for academic researchers, please visit the newly updated EMA Academia webpage. You can also contact EMA directly via academia@ema.europa.eu for further guidance. Thank you for watching, and we wish you the very best in your development journey. We express our sincere gratitude to everyone who contributed to the development of this video, including colleagues from EMA, the Scientific Advice Working Party members, the academic developers and EPARs coordination and support team, whose expertise and support made this work possible.